Good morning, welcome to Vlogmas day 19. Today's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to answer the questions that you have left for me on Instagram and on YouTube. This morning so far has been very relaxed. I had my usual morning knitting and watching vlogs and catching up with Legacy Fibre Art's most recent podcast. They haven't podcasted in quite a while. So I've had a very relaxed morning. We went out on a little trip to get some sweet treats, some donuts and some coffee. So I'm fueled up for this time of answering your questions. Thank you to everybody who left questions. It's been fun reading through them, and hopefully you'll enjoy the questions that I've been asked and hopefully the answers that I give. I haven't organised them particularly or split them into knitting questions and life questions. I'm just taking them as they came to me. There's a few, but I'll hopefully not take too long to answer them all. The Bat Lady Knits asked, she was the first question, and she asked if I could spend a day with an ancestor, who would I choose and why? And I think if you've watched any of my previous vlogs, you will know the answer to this already. I would love to spend a day with my grandmother, my father's mother. I have a photograph of her up across the way here in my craft space, because she's the lady that I've been named for. She was Catherine, and she was a sewer, and I learned how to sew on her sewing machine that my dad taught me to sew on, which I've told you all before. But I just think it would be really fascinating. She lived in an era where sewing wasn't necessarily for pleasure. It was a means of income in a rural area. And I would just love to talk to her and see how she worked and what she did. I don't think there's any knitting in that side of the family. I think that my dad's side of the family were very much sewers. His aunts would have embroidered, and as they called it, sprigging, and then they would have sold that. So to talk to them, but particularly to my grandmother, I would just love an insight into their days and just into their life, and maybe pick up tips and skills that I don't have. I'd love to find out how she embroidered and what she did and what she used and why she did it. Just general chat. And I suppose at that point I would know find out what my dad was like as a little boy from her. Those would be things I would love to find out. My mum's side of the family would have been knitters, and again, I only knew one of my grandparents, so I think I would love to meet all of the rest of my grandparents. I think it's a generation I've missed out on. I know how much my children have valued having all their grandparents for such a long time. They're left now with my mum, but they've known and can remember all their grandparents. I only knew my grandfather, my dad's dad. So yes, meeting my grandmother, I think, would be the person I would love. I would love to have met her or spend a day with her. Janet Lloyd and Nana Kelly and Knit One Yoga 2 on Instagram all questioned or had questions around my love for Canada. Again, if you've followed me for any length of time, I talk about Canada a lot. Janet lives in New Brunswick, and she wondered why I love it so much, and I don't know. I just do. Nana Kelly asked how did I end up in Canada, for how long, and what brought me back to Ireland. So I don't know if I've ever given the impression that I have lived there. I haven't. I've only been there on holiday. I've been there now 3 times. And I just fell in love with the place. I feel very relaxed there, and I've just found the people so friendly, and it's as simple as that. I just fell in love with it. I just find the people very friendly, and it feels very like home. I feel very much at home there. Unfortunately, it's not home, but that's how I feel. I feel as though the people welcomed me and made me part of the place. I stay in Ottawa when I'm there. I stay with Selma, and I've made friends, really good friends in the area that I speak to on a fairly regular basis. WhatsApp is a great tool, and I just love Ottawa. I think Ottawa's a beautiful place. And Knit One Yoga 2 had asked me had I travelled anywhere besides Ottawa, and unfortunately not, but it is my dream. I always said that my dream for my 50th birthday, which is looming, that I would love to travel across Canada and see, well, a snapshot of it because it's such a huge country, but I would love to see other areas. Who knows whether that'll happen now because of travel restrictions, how long those are going to last, or whether it'll happen, but I would love to see other parts. Peter has family in Saskatchewan, and I have family in Toronto, I think. So it would just be lovely to see other parts of the country and all the various landscapes that are there. But my heart will always, I think, lie in Ottawa. I love that area and I love the people there. And I would go back at the drop of a hat. I had to cancel this year's trip, obviously, as many have had to do, but hopefully in the very near future I'll get back. Pinata Farmer said that one of her regrets is that she was unable to share her love of knitting with her daughter, and she wondered if my daughter had found a love of knitting. Amy learned how to knit and has knit a few things. I started a pair of socks for maybe 3-4 years ago, and she finished those. She knit shorty socks, but she has no interest at all in knitting, and it's got put aside. She knows how to now, so maybe someday she'll come back to it, but she has absolutely no interest in it whatsoever, and very rarely would wear hand knit items. This year I did knit one. I knit the Kingston sweater for her. She saw mine that I wear over my PJs, and she wanted one as well. And that's about the first time, probably since she was a little girl, that she asked for something that was hand knit. So she's really no interest in knitting. Donna Snesko did ask, was James still knitting? James is my 16-year-old son, and it's him who has inherited the love of knitting. He enjoys knitting. He hasn't knit in a little while because of the pressure of school and exams, but he has knit quite a lot. He knit me a hat. He knit one for himself. He has knit a cowl, and about 3 days ago he asked could he wind up some yarn because he has quite the stash to start knitting again over Christmas. So thankfully I have one who loves to knit. He just finds it relaxing and time out when he's knitting, so I'm going to encourage that one. HL asked what I do for a living. She had noticed that I wear a uniform, and I also got asked I didn't write it down, but somebody asked about recently, and I apologise for not having your name here, about teaching. I no longer teach. I was a high school English teacher. I taught English to 11 to 18-year-old kids for many years. I loved my job. I stopped when I had the kids because I wanted to be at home with them. So I was out of teaching for a number of years, and then I went back about 6 years ago and worked as a supply teacher. I didn't want to go back full time, and I worked for a few years as a supply teacher. So that is my profession. That's what I trained as, and I worked in high schools teaching English to the kids there. I didn't particularly enjoy supply teaching because it was just, any school could have called, you didn't know from day to day whether you were going to go into work or not. And I ended up actually probably 90% of the time not teaching my subject. I was in classes where I was supervising kids maybe who were doing science or maths, which I have no knowledge of, or very little knowledge of. And I didn't enjoy that experience. I wanted to teach my subject, and I liked, if I was teaching, I preferred the interaction and the relationships you develop with a class if you have them for a prolonged length of time. But so I stopped supply teaching, it was actually just last year. And that was partly because last year I was ill and I had to stop anyway. And I really didn't relish the thought of going back. And then Hobbycraft opened in Northern Ireland, and it's just a large craft store for those of you who are not from the UK. It's like Michael's, I suppose, would be the closest store to it in type. But Hobbycraft opened, and I jumped at the chance of working in a store. What I love about it is that a lot of the time I get to talk about my craft. Sometimes I'm put in the art department, which is funny because I know nothing about art, and I usually have to call somebody else if I'm asked a very specific question. But I do get to talk about yarn and about knitting, and I enjoy that. And what I am enjoying at the minute is the fact that I can go into work, do my job, and chat to people, and then I can leave work and forget about it. Because as a teacher, you do not forget about your job when you come home. You're either marking papers or planning lessons or trying to figure out a way to engage a pupil that you know isn't engaged. So you never leave it at work. And the joy of this job is that I can leave it at work. I come out and I forget about it until the next time I'm there. And when I'm there, I talk about the things I love. So that's what I do. I have to wear a uniform for that. So I work in a store. Ostara Bunny asked me a very hard question, actually. I had to really think about this one. She asked, what's the best life advice I've ever been given? And I've been given lots of advice over the years. Some I've taken and some I haven't. One piece of advice I was given that I took to heart was given to me a long time ago when I was starting university. An old primary school teacher said to me that I was not to let my work interfere with my social life at university. So I took him at his word, and I enjoyed my social life in university. I loved university. I don't know if that could be seen as good life advice though. I think probably one of the best pieces of advice I was ever given. I was told I have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and I should listen twice as hard as I talk. And I think that's a piece of advice that a lot of people should take on. Listen before you speak, just generally. And that's the advice I've given my kids. Just always listen first, and have a wee bit of thought before you speak. So that, I would say, is my best piece of life advice. Listen twice as much as you speak. You have 2 ears and only 1 mouth. Sandra Bendig and Carol Mays asked how long I've been friends with Selma and how we met. I talk about Selma a lot. I know it can sound like the Selma fan club on this channel. Selma is Little Big Knits. She has the Little Big Knits podcast. I've known Selma now for 3 years, coming 4 years now in March. I watched Selma when she was part of the Two Tangled Skeins podcast and would have seen her on there. It was one of the very first podcasts I ever watched, and watched and admired what she did and what the girls there were doing. And then in 2017, Selma said that she was coming to Edinburgh Yarn Festival, and I was going to it for the first time as well. And I just messaged her and said, would you like to meet up? Which we did, and the rest is history. We stayed in touch after it. And then that June of 2017, I was talking about going to Rhinebeck for the first time, and she said, come via Canada, stay with me and we'll travel together. And yeah, She's, I would say, my best friend, and we talk, if not every day, it's every other day, either through WhatsApp or we call each other and talk for prolonged lengths of time. I have been and stayed with her and her family now. Well, we stayed with them twice, and then we stayed close to them the third time. I stayed with them on my own, and then the third time we were there, Peter and James were with me, and we stayed close and just spent a lot of time with her and her family, and it just feels like home. And she has now been here, and we've just, it's been lovely, and long may it continue. So we met through Edinburgh Yarn Festival, and we have been friends since. Elaine Allerton, Natalie Wallace, Anna Hutchins and Glenda Bathgate all asked how long I've been knitting and who taught me. I have been knitting since I was a child. I was taught probably by my mum. I don't actually remember sitting down and learning how to knit. I was taught by my mum, and at that point in the 1970s and early 80s, you were still taught how to knit in school. That is all gone now, but you were still taught how to knit in school. And can I tell you, I hated every minute of it. It's a terrible admission as a knitter to make. I hated knitting. And I think it's because my mum is a knitter, and at that point was a very prolific knitter. She knit Aran companies for the Aran sweaters for the Donegal companies. And she was always knitting. She was a fast knitter, and I was very intimidated by that. So any knitting I did at primary school is all beautiful. Doesn't look like the knitting of a 8-9-year-old little girl, and that's because it probably wasn't, because I brought it home and threw it at my mum and went, will you knit that for me? I hated knitting. So I didn't knit for a long time. I liked sewing. I would have sewn more. And about, I don't know how many years ago, I think maybe when Amy was small, and I think maybe James might have been here when I started to knit again, I learned how to crochet off YouTube and really enjoyed crochet. And then I thought, do you know what, I'll try knitting again, and I didn't look back. I very rarely, I do a little bit of crochet, but it's knitting now, and it's been knitting since. So really knitting seriously for probably about 15 years, and now it's taken over. Tina Blair asked, have I ever been to the US, and if so, where? Yes, I've been to America. First place I went to in America was New Orleans. I spent 4 weeks there. Northern Ireland does a thing called the Ulster Project, which is bringing both communities together. And I went as a leader and brought 16 teenagers to New Orleans, and we stayed there for 4 weeks. So that was the first place. Then I've been to Florida 3 times. First time was on honeymoon in 1997, and then we've been back as a family twice. And Peter and I have been to Washington, DC, and I've been to Rhinebeck twice. So yeah, I've been to America and I love it and hope to be back. Tina Edwardson asked me my dream knit project and what yarn brand would I use. That I have found very hard. I think I would love, dream knit project would be Shetland knitting and Fair Isle, and to be really, really good at Fair Isle. So that would be the dream project, would be a really intricate Fair Isle project, but to be really good at it. Yarn brand, for Shetland I do love Jameson and Smith, or Jamesons of Shetland, either of those. And I really like Kate Davies' yarn brand as well for colour work. I think that would be dream knitting, would be really, really intricate Fair Isle that I could do well, which I can't yet, but maybe sometime. Esther Rubin asked, have I always lived in Northern Ireland? And I was also asked, and I have written it down, I want to get the name Yep. Jan Yarn Taxi Driver, Sweet Grace Notes, and Carol Klosowski also asked variations. Have I always lived in Northern Ireland? Have I always lived in the same area? And where in Ireland do I live? I live in Northern Ireland, so I'm right at the top of the island of Ireland. I'm kind of northeast. I'm very close to Belfast, kind of Belfast along Belfast Lough. I'm sure some of you have heard of Carrickfergus. There are many songs about Carrickfergus, and I live between Belfast and Carrickfergus, so I'm just at the start of the north coast. Kind of, if I keep following the shore, I'd be going along the north coast, so I'm right at the top, northeast. And I've always lived in Northern Ireland. I'm not from this area of Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland is a small country. You drive for 2 hours and you've driven the width of it, and it's probably the same, maybe slightly less depth wise. It's a very small country. I am now in the northeast. I am from the most westerly point of Northern Ireland. I grew up on the Donegal border, and so I was right in the west in County Tyrone. So I'm a Tyrone girl. I now live in County Antrim. I have lived in every county except for County Fermanagh through university or work, and now I got married to a County Antrim boy, so I've been living here now for the last 24 years. I was also asked, was I near Angela, who is Knitting on the Farm podcast, and Emma, who is Woolly Mammoth Fibres. I probably live in and around just about the middle between the two. Angela's County Down, so she's one direction, and Emma is up on the north coast, where I went to university, so she would probably be the closer one of the two. So she would live about 45 minutes away from me, and Angela lives about an hour in the other direction. So we're all very close together. As I said, we're not a very big country. Esther Rubin also asked, how did I meet Peter, my husband? That's could be a long story. I'll try and cut it short. We met through a mutual friend, the girl that I went to university with. He ended up working with. She moved house, had a housewarming party that was cancelled. This was pre-mobile phone days, so I didn't hear that it was cancelled. He didn't know it was cancelled, and we both arrived at the house, and that's how we met. Met that one occasion. I think I saw him one more time, and then we started dating, and 10 months later we were married, and that's nearly 24 years ago. So that's how I met Peter. Yarn Bear asked, how did the Irish clear ice from our walkways? In Texas it's salt or cat litter, which I thought was interesting, but it makes sense. We use salt as well. Actually, about 5 miles down the road there are salt mines, and we export our salt to Canada. But we use salt. Our walkways would get very icy. Susan McDermott asked, does it snow where I am? We have more ice than snow. We very rarely get a large snowfall. We'll get flurries, but it's usually very wet snow and it doesn't lie. We've had a few years where there has been a really big snowfall. I think 2010 would have been our last huge, but our country grinds to a halt if there's half an inch, because we're not equipped for it, we're not used to it, because we have so little of it. We don't have snow tires in our cars, or winter tires. So we grind to a halt if we have half an inch of snow. Country comes to a standstill. But our roads are salted and our walkways are salted. Susan McDermott also asked, were there garment recommendations for the minis? I'm knitting the caramel, which I've talked about in vlog 16. Actually, you can make any garment out of the minis. I would say any plain sweater. So the flax would work well with it. Any plain knit. I'm actually wearing my Nuke sweater, which is out of, or vest, which is out of the very first line of magazine, would be perfect for minis. It's just anything that's plain. I think anything that would have too much pattern would be too fussy, but anything that's plain, you just, instead of a single yarn, just add them in as you come to them. I don't know if there are any specific sweaters that are knit from, or patterns that have been created for minis for sweaters. It's usually shawls and socks. If you have any, put them in the comments below that you could recommend to people. But I don't know of any, but I would just, any plain sweater. The flax is a very plain sweater. You could probably do the Felix sweater that I knit this year. You could do it. It has a little bit of eyelet work here, but that wouldn't affect the pattern or affect the minis. So any plain garment. Hollyhock Fibre Company, who is Claire McDade, asked my favourite place in Northern Ireland and why. I think, Claire, you have connections to Northern Ireland, and you talked about Murlough Bay, which is in County Down, Benevna, which is in County Derry and close to my home, and Ballintoy, which is a little village on the very north coast near the Giant's Causeway. My favourite place in Northern Ireland is definitely the north coast. There are many beautiful places. I can see the Mourne Mountains from here. I grew up near the lakes in Fermanagh. But the north coast, I love the sea. My favourite place has the most unromantic name. It's Port Muck, and it's about 15 or 20 minutes from here, and it's my happy place. If I'm stressed or just need time out, I drive down to Port Muck and sit on the rocks there, and I'm looking out over the Irish Sea towards Scotland. I can see Scotland on a good day, and some of the islands. You can see some of the Scottish Isles from here on good, if there's good weather. So anywhere along the north coast, it's just, I can feel myself relax when I go there, and it's my happy place. Chris Nugent said that there are holiday lights up where she lives, and do we have any here? We don't do the holiday lights outside maybe quite as much as North America. There are some houses that do. We had a little drive around the other night, and I think there's less this year. Thankfully, people around, just when night's falling, keep their curtains open, and you can see their lovely Christmas trees and their windows, so you could see all that, but there are very few lights outside. Jackie Ferguson asked my biggest knitting influences. Kate Davies is my favourite designer. I think I love her work, so she would be one of my biggest influences. I'm influenced a lot by now the podcasts on YouTube. I like Bee Mandarins. I like The Gentle Knitter. Anything that they knit, I'm tempted to knit. Fibre Trek, they would be big knitting influences, and Selma, of course, would be a knitting influence. She's my yarn whisperer. If I have any questions, she's the person I go to. Michelle said, what's my favourite yarn or dyers that I've knit with? Favourite yarns, I like the Kate Davies yarn. I love anything that Blacker produces, Blacker yarns. Green Mountain Spinnery is one that I picked up when I was at Rhinebeck, and I love Green Mountain Spinnery. I like rustic yarns. I do like the woolly wools. Favourite yarn dyers, Fine Fish Yarns, of course, and Woolly Mammoth. There are so many yarn dyers that I like. I really don't like picking out because I'm going to leave out people, but they would be two of the main ones. She also asked what prompted me to start my channel. I watched a lot of YouTube channels for a long time and really enjoyed the sense of community that they seem to have and the interactions with knitters. I don't really go to very many knit groups, and particularly at the start when I had started to knit more seriously, I wasn't part of a knitting group, and it gave me a feeling of community. So that's why I watched them, and then I just wanted to be part of that, and I was very nervous because I actually don't like being in front of the camera and get very awkward. It doesn't feel very natural to me, and but I thought I would give it a go, and the response that I got, and now the community that is built up and the friends that I have made through this, that's what keeps me going. I love the community, and that was really the reason I wanted to start it. We're getting through. This is going to be quite a long vlog. Sorry. Kent of Kent asked what's my favourite yarn, and I think I've covered that one. Blacker yarns would be probably one of my favourites. Every one I get is my favourite, becomes my favourite. What pattern, he also asked, which pattern have I knit more than once? I tend not to knit things more than once, even though I think I might. I've knit the Kingston sweater recently, and I've knit that twice. I knit one for myself and one for Amy. I've knit the Felix sweater, and I'm now knitting the Felix cardigan, so I don't know if that counts, but the pattern's very similar. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I've knit more than once. Oh, I knit, it was a t-shirt. And the name's blanked. I'll put it in the bottom because I've blanked on the name. There was a t-shirt that I've knit 2 of. So yeah, I've knit a couple of patterns more than once. And he asked what my favourite FO this year was. My favourite, I brought them down. My favourite FO was my ranunculus. I love this sweater. I think it's casual but can be very dressy. It's the lightest thing I have ever worn. You kind of forget that you're wearing a hand knit sweater. So the ranunculus was one, and the other one is my Kate cardigan, and the reason it's amongst my favourites is really because I never thought I was going to finish it. It had a long history, but I finished it this year. So, and it has become one of my favourite items to wear. So that one, those were my 2 favourite FOs. And Selma actually asked me one of my favourite 3 hand knitted items. Those, I suppose there's kind of my ranunculus, definitely. My Scully cardigan. Is my most worn, and I think someone else asked that. It's not really showing it up. My Scully cardigan, and this is the Riding to Avalon sweater, and it's like a hoodie. It always comes out on the camera as quite grey, but it's a green, moss green. It was knit in Rowan felted tweed. It's like a sweatshirt, as I said, and my first colourwork sweater was this one, and it's the Miss Rachel's sweater by Kate Davies. So those would be my top knitting or favourite items that I've knit, along with the ranunculus from this year. Jennifer Klunder, I'm not sure if that's pronounced right, asked what does my husband do. He's a senior lecturer in computer science at Ulster University, which is just down the road, and he teaches web authoring and programming and things that I know nothing about. Sylvia McCormick asked, do I think there's yarn snobbery? Yes, I do think there's yarn snobbery, and probably I could be accused of it in that I only like to knit with woolly wool. Personally, I don't really like working with acrylic, But I do think there's a place for all yarns. I think we all have to knit within our means, and people shouldn't be judged for knitting within their means. There are times I can buy the really nice, expensive yarns, and there are times when I can't. And I am quite happy to buy big brands, because even within that I can buy woolly wool. It doesn't always have to be acrylic. Buying a cheaper brand does not mean that you can't knit with woolly wool. My Christmas sweater, my dear sweater that I knit recently, is knit in a big brand, and I think the sweater came in at less, or in and around £25, which is fabulous. I think that we need to also suit our project to the yarn. If I was to do and create blankets, or if I was knitting for kids, I probably wouldn't use woolly wool. I would use the acrylic yarns, and I would buy the inexpensive acrylic yarns, because I want them to be hard wearing and practical, and particularly if they're for kids and you're a young mum who is dealing with kids around you all the time. You don't have time to look after knitwear maybe the way that you would do for your own garments. You want to be able to throw them in the washing machine. So I think there's yarn for everybody. I think you knit within your means and don't feel ashamed of that. You can get beautiful wools at all prices, and I don't like it when people belittle cheaper, more inexpensive yarns, or projects that are done with that. If you knit beautifully, it doesn't matter what yarn you use. And what's beautiful to you, that's what's important, and what you enjoy knitting with, and what you can afford to knit with. But yes, Sylvia, I do think there is yarn snobbery, and I don't think it's right. Does that make sense? Anne asked how do I store my knitwear. No particular way. They're just kept in drawers and cupboards like the rest of my clothes. I do throw in a little I have little things, that pieces of wood that I soak with cedarwood oil or something, that's meant to be repellent to moths. Thankfully that's not something we have an issue with, but just in case. But they're just kept in drawers. There's nothing, I don't do anything fancy with my knitwear. It's just put into the wardrobe like everything else. And Judith Letson asked, how do I wash and dry my knits? Socks, I used to only hand wash socks. Now, because most of them have a certain amount of nylon and whatever, I do put them in the washing machine, but on a very, very low wash, low temperature. So I do my socks that way, and my garments, when I wash those, I do soak. I just hand wash them, soak them in wool wash, and then I will put them through a very low spin in the washing machine to get most of the moisture out, and I make sure there's no heat in that, just to so that there's no felting or whatever. So that's how I would wash my knitwear. JMQ Creates asked me on Instagram, does my mum live close to me? Because I've talked about her and maybe not seeing her at Christmas. She lives still in County Tyrone, so she's about 2 hours away from me. It's about 90 something miles over the mountains. So she's a couple of hours away, and under normal circumstances I would see her every few weeks, but obviously we're not living in normal circumstances. Was my dad, or was it my grandpa, who was born in 1918? It was my dad. My dad passed away last year at the age of 101 and a half. So he was born in 1918. He was an older dad when I came around, and well, he was brilliant, but he was born in 1918. Hedgewitch13 asked me on Instagram what I was thinking of putting into the new advent calendar that I had shown a couple of days ago. I'd got a wooden box with little drawers in it. It'll be minis either that I've created or that I'm given. So yeah, it'll be another mini skein advent, and there'll always be a chocolate in it as well. Adele Waugh Salisbury on Instagram asked, can I recommend some knitting books? I can. There are so many, and obviously the knit along is starting on January the 1st on the channel Knitting the Books, and it's where we knit something from the books that we have on our shelves, or as I've been asked quite a few times, can you use ebooks? And yes, because so many people now maybe don't have the books, but they have their books on ebook form, so yes, you can use an ebook. But there's kind of 3 categories I thought I would share with you. Magazines. These are my favourite magazines, and I've talked about those in the last couple of vlogs as well. Lina and Making. They would be my favourite magazines. Making has more variety of crafts, not just knitting. Lina is really primarily a knitting magazine. Pattern books that I have that I love. Knit Scene is a book I've had for a long time. There's a few things I want to knit in it. This is the hoodie that I showed you, the Riding to Avalon. It was out of this book, and it is the best of Knit Scene magazines patterns. So there's that one. I have a few Kate Davies books. I love Eilay. There are a few projects in here that I want to knit, and I have this book as well, the Rhinebeck Sweater, and I've knit now 3 or 4 projects out of this one, and I love this book. So those are pattern books. I mean, there are oodles, but those are the 3 main ones. And also, in terms of knitting books, I love anything that was by Elizabeth Zimmerman. Just more to read than, I've never knit anything from them, but they're a joy to read because there's a few anecdotes in them that are amusing and interesting. And she just was a bit of a knitting guru, so I do like those. If you want something relaxing, you all know, I'm sure, The Yarn Harlot, Stephanie Pearl McPhee. I love her books. They always make me laugh out loud, and I enjoy those. And I also really, really enjoy anything by Clara Parks. So those are kind of the 3 sections, just kind of the ready knitting books, the pattern books, and magazines. Those would probably be my top picks from those. Where are we? We're nearly through. Catherine McKelvey 68 asked on Instagram what my most worn item ever knit is, and it's definitely my Scully cardigan. I wear it all the time. Dingle Kringle from Instagram asked, do I like to pick a pattern and then find the yarn, or do I find the yarn and then pick the pattern? I nearly always pick the pattern first and shop for the yarn then. I do have random skeins that I'm also working through in a knit along, the Lucky Dip KAL that we're doing in January. So I do have single skeins, but the majority of what I buy now are sweater quantities, and I always have a project attached to that sweater quantity. So I pick my pattern and then go and shop for that particular pattern. SH Backen, how am I through the day when I get up so early? I'm an early riser. I get up usually just after 5, but between 5 and 6 every day, pretty much. And how do I get on through the day? I'm okay if I have an early night. If I'm burning the candle at both ends, I flag around mid-afternoon and sometimes go for a little nap. But yeah, I'm usually okay if I keep it to early mornings and early nights. A few people asked general knitting questions that were specific to the projects that I'm doing, and I think I've answered them on personally. Any caramel sweater questions, hopefully I've answered in yesterday's day 18 and the vlog there. The only thing I wouldn't have answered was needle size. I'm knitting mine on a 4.5mm. The recommendations of 4, but for the gauge I liked, it was 4.5. You have to pick the needle according to your gauge and the fabric that you like. And I was also asked about the mohair and whatever yardage. I mean, I think I'll probably use about 1200 meters or maybe slightly less of minis, probably less. I need the same yardage, meterage for the mohair. If you have any other questions about the caramel sweater, ask me and I'll answer those personally. Happy Fox 74 said, as well as the heel toe do-si-do sock, which is my favourite pattern for self-striping, are there any other patterns? I knit, and I showed it yesterday, the candy cane socks, and it was a slip stitch pattern, and I have the notes for that on the Ravelry page. It's one of the few Ravelry pages I have up to date. There is for the candy cane stripe socks, I have a little recipe there for how I did the slip stitch. The zigzagular socks that I showed yesterday, I've knit a couple of times. They're really good for self-striping. They're by Susie White. And I did find one that I would like to try, and that's the Easy Pattern for Self-Striping Socks by Friday Studios, and I'll link all those in the box below. So those would be the main ones, but I just love the heel toe do-si-do. I just keep knitting that forever when it comes to self-striping. I think I've answered everything, and thank you if you have stayed for this length of time. I hope I haven't missed anybody's question out. If I have, give me a prod and I'll answer it for you there on YouTube. But I think that's it all. The rest of today here is going to be spent relaxing. It's our weekly watching of Lewis and a Christmas movie tonight, and tonight's the final of Strictly Come Dancing, which Amy and I are looking forward to. But it's going to be a very relaxing day, so I think you've probably seen enough of me today, and I'll not be tuning in again on the vlog today, but I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow and seeing what tomorrow brings. And thank you so much. I will say again, thank you so much for sticking with this and for sending in the questions and for being patient and listening to all the answers. See you tomorrow.